Beneath the majestic landscapes of North America lies a history seldom told, marked by battles, resilience, and the indomitable spirit of its original inhabitants. This is the saga of the Native American tribes, the original stewards of this vast land. Long before the arrival of European settlers, these tribes flourished in harmony with nature, their lives deeply woven into the rhythm of the earth. Their cultures thrived, rich and diverse, echoing the vast landscapes they called home. From the dense forests of the east to the expansive plains of the west, each tribe forged a unique bond with the land. But the winds of change were stirring. Across the ocean, European settlers were setting sail, their eyes set on the New World. Little did the Native American tribes know that their peaceful existence was on the brink of disruption. The arrival of European settlers would ignite centuries of conflict. The history of Native American resistance against European colonizers is marked by numerous conflicts, uprisings, and acts of defiance. These battles and campaigns, often overshadowed in mainstream historical narratives, highlight the struggles, resilience, and enduring spirit of Native American peoples in the face of overwhelming odds. Here's a list of some of the most significant Native American wars and resistances. In the heart of the Southwest, the Pueblo peoples orchestrated one of the most successful revolts in history. The Pueblo Revolt, also known as Pope's Rebellion or Pope's Rebellion, was a remarkable instance of indigenous resistance. The Pueblo peoples of present-day New Mexico rose against their Spanish colonizers in a coordinated and successful rebellion. In the late 17th century, the Pueblos, a collection of diverse communities sharing agricultural practices and complex societal structures, found themselves under the oppressive rule of Spanish colonizers. The Spanish sought to impose their culture, religion, and economic systems on the Pueblos, disregarding their rich traditions and spiritual beliefs. The Pueblos were forced into labor under the encomienda system, where they toiled on lands they had once owned. The Spanish also brought with them new diseases, which wreaked havoc on the native population, further exacerbating their suffering and discontent. This tension reached a boiling point in 1680, sparking a revolt led by a visionary Tewa religious leader, Pope. Over the next few days, the Pueblos united in an unprecedented show of resistance, successfully driving the Spanish out of their lands. The Spanish were ill-prepared for the intensity and scale of the uprising. The Pueblos, employing tactics born of intimate knowledge of their lands, quickly overran Spanish settlements and missions, destroying symbols of Spanish authority and culture. Churches were razed, and symbols of Christianity were destroyed in a symbolic reversal of the Spanish conquest. This victory, however fleeting, showcased the strength, courage, and strategic brilliance of the Pueblo peoples. Rising against Spanish oppression, they reclaimed their freedom, if only for a while. King Philip's War is named after the Wampanoag leader Metacomet, also known as Pamatacom, and by his adopted English name, King Philip. This brutal war was one of the earliest and deadliest conflicts in the history of North America. As the colonists' hunger for land grew, tension between the Native American tribes and the English settlers in the New England area escalated. King Philip's War, which raged from 1675 to 1678, was the fiery result of these growing tensions. The Wampanoag, Narragansett, and other tribes, led by Metacom, fought valiantly against the English colonists and their Native American allies. The war was devastating, resulting in heavy losses on both sides, and it changed the landscape of the New England colonies forever. This war was not just a struggle for land, it was a struggle for a way of life. It marked a turning point in the history of Native American and European relations in North America, and set a precedent for future resistance against colonial encroachment. In the dense forests of New England, the Pequot War marked the violent beginning of colonial expansion. As early as 1636, tensions between the Pequot tribe and English settlers began to escalate. The Pequot War's roots lay in the complex interplay of trade, territorial disputes, and burgeoning alliances in early 17th century New England. The Pequot tribe, dominant in the region that is now Connecticut, had grown increasingly powerful, controlling the fur trade and demanding tribute from neighboring tribes. Their growing influence put them at odds with other Native American groups and the expanding English colonies. Struggles for control and dominance over the fur trade and regional influence ignited a series of violent encounters. The colonists, allied with other tribes such as the Mohegan and Narragansett, waged war against the Pequot. The most infamous episode of the Pequot War was the Mystic Massacre in May 1637. English forces under Captains John Mason and John Underhill, accompanied by their native allies, launched a pre-dawn attack on a fortified Pequot village near the Mystic River. The attackers set fire to the village and shot anyone who tried to escape. The massacre resulted in the deaths of hundreds of Pequots, including women and children. It marked a significant turning point in the war. Following the Mystic Massacre, the Pequot resistance crumbled. The surviving Pequots fled, pursued by English and Allied forces. In September 1638, the Treaty of Hartford was signed, effectively dissolving the Pequot nation. Surviving Pequots were either enslaved and sent to the West Indies, absorbed into other tribes, or forced to live under the control of their conquerors. The treaty outlawed the very name Pequot, symbolizing the total defeat of the tribe. The Pequot War had significant and long-lasting effects on the region and the broader trajectory of Native American-European relations in North America. For the English, the war secured their dominance in New England and opened the way for further expansion. For Native Americans, the war marked the beginning of a pattern of dispossession, displacement, and violent suppression. Fueled by the lucrative fur trade, the Beaver Wars saw the Iroquois Confederacy fiercely defend their land and way of life. The 17th century was a time of intense competition, as European powers vied for control of the fur trade. Beavers, whose pelts were highly prized in Europe, became the unsuspecting epicenter of a series of bloody conflicts known as the Beaver Wars. The Iroquois Confederacy, an alliance of 5, later 6, Native American nations, was a formidable force. They fought not just for the control of the fur trade, but to safeguard their homeland and their way of life from encroaching French colonizers and their native allies, the Huron and Algonquin tribes. The Beaver Wars were marked by a series of brutal campaigns, raids, and battles. One of the most significant was the destruction of the Huron by the Iroquois in the mid-1640s. This victory significantly weakened French influence in the region and disrupted the fur trade. The Dutch, and later the English, who took over Dutch colonies in North America, also played a significant role in the Beaver Wars. They were the primary suppliers of firearms to the Iroquois, which enhanced the latter's military capabilities. The Dutch and English involvement was driven by their desire to control the fur trade and counter French influence in the region. The Beaver Wars began to wind down towards the end of the 17th century. The Treaty of Ryswick in 1697, which ended a series of European conflicts, also helped ease tensions in North America. The Iroquois, having expanded their territory and solidified their control over the fur trade, began to focus more on diplomacy and trade relations. The Beaver Wars profoundly impacted the Native American tribes of eastern North America. They led to significant shifts in tribal territories, the displacement of populations, and changes in the socio-political dynamics of the region. The wars also demonstrated the ability of Native American tribes to adapt to the introduction of European weaponry. In the aftermath of the French and Indian War, Pontiac, an Ottawa leader, united multiple tribes in a formidable uprising against British forces. The year was 1763. The colonists' victory over French Canada had left a bitter taste in the mouths of the indigenous tribes. The British, unlike the French, were not interested in maintaining alliances with the native tribes. They were more concerned with expansion, and this disregard for tribal sovereignty sparked the flame of resistance. Pontiac's War, as it came to be known, was a powerful show of unity among tribes who had previously been at odds. The Delaware, Shawnee, and Seneca tribes, among others, joined Pontiac's cause, launching attacks on British forts and settlements in the Great Lakes area, the Ohio River Valley, and the Illinois country. Their collective resistance resulted in a significant shift in British colonial policy. Pontiac's War had significant consequences. It highlighted the ability of Native American tribes to form powerful coalitions and pose a serious challenge to European colonial powers. The war led to a more cautious British approach to westward expansion and contributed to the mounting debts that would, in part, lead to the imposition of new taxes on the American colonies, sowing the seeds of the American Revolution. For Native Americans, the war was a temporary check against the loss of their lands, but ultimately foreshadowed the struggles they would face in resisting European expansion. Within the Creek Nation, a civil war erupted, intertwined with American expansionism. The Creek War, also known as the Red Stick War, was a regional conflict between opposing Creek factions, European empires, and the United States, taking place primarily in Alabama and along the American frontier. The war is considered part of the larger conflict known as the War of 1812 between the United States and Britain. It was marked by internal divisions within the Creek Nation, with the Red Sticks, named for the red-painted war clubs, seeking to resist U.S. expansion and cultural assimilation, and the White Sticks being more inclined towards peace and accommodation with American settlers. The Creek Nation was a powerful confederacy of Native American tribes in the southeastern United States, with a complex society that had engaged in trade with Europeans and Americans for centuries. By the early 19th century, pressure from American settlers, land speculators, and state governments for Creek lands had intensified, leading to internal divisions within the Creek society. These tensions were exacerbated by the influence of external powers, including Britain and Spain, who sought to curb American expansion by supporting Native American resistance. The war was brutal and bloody, culminating in the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, where over 800 Red Sticks were killed. Following the Creek War, the Treaty of Fort Jackson forced the Creek Nation to cede millions of acres of land to the United States. This war led to devastating battles and the tragic Trail of Tears, which saw the forced relocation of Native American nations from their ancestral homelands in the southeastern United States to areas west of the Mississippi River, mandated by the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Led by the fierce leader Black Hawk, the Sauk and Fox tribes mounted a valiant resistance in the Midwest. As the early 1830s dawned, these tribes found themselves pushed to the brink by relentless American expansion. In response, Black Hawk, a seasoned warrior, rallied his people to reclaim their ancestral lands. The war began in earnest in the spring of 1832, pitting a coalition of Sauk and Fox warriors against American militias and regular troops. Despite being outnumbered, Black Hawk and his men fought with a tenacity that stunned their adversaries. The conflict was intense and brutal, with losses on both sides, but ultimately the superior numbers and resources of the American forces prevailed. Yet the Black Hawk War was more than a military conflict. It was a bold statement of resistance, a testament to the indomitable spirit of Native American peoples. This war marks a poignant chapter in the struggle for native lands. In the swamps of Florida, the Seminole Wars epitomized the unbreakable spirit of Native Americans. These conflicts, spanning 4 decades from 1816 to 1858, were not just battles over territory, but a testament to the resilience and determination of the Seminole people. The wars were instigated by the United States' attempts to forcibly remove the Seminoles from their ancestral lands, sparking a fierce resistance. The Seminoles, a coalition of various Native American and African American groups, were known for their formidable guerrilla warfare tactics, which they used adeptly in the dense Florida swamplands. The first of the Seminole War began in 1816. It was sparked by U.S. concerns over Seminoles harboring fugitive slaves and their resistance to U.S. expansion into Florida, then a Spanish territory. The conflict escalated with General Andrew Jackson's incursion into Florida in 1817, attacking Seminole settlements. The war ended with the Adams-Onis Treaty in 1819, where Spain ceded Florida to the United States, but it set the precedent for future conflicts. The Second Seminole War was the longest and most costly of the 3 wars. It was precipitated by the Indian Removal Act of 1830, which sought to relocate Native American tribes to lands west of the Mississippi River. The Seminoles, led by chiefs such as Osceola, vehemently opposed removal. In 1835, the conflict ignited with the Dade Massacre, where Seminoles ambushed a U.S. Army company, killing over 100 soldiers. This marked the beginning of a protracted and brutal war. The U.S. Army, underestimating the challenge of fighting in the dense Florida swamps, faced fierce resistance from the Seminoles, who employed guerrilla tactics. One of the most notable events of this war was the capture of Osceola in 1837. He was seized under a flag of truce when he arrived for supposed peace talks at Fort Peyton, violating the sanctity of diplomatic protocol. Despite substantial military efforts, the U.S. could not subdue the Seminoles completely. The war ended in 1842, not with a formal treaty, but with the U.S. government essentially abandoning its efforts to remove all Seminoles from Florida. The third and final Seminole War was sparked by conflicts over land and the continued presence of Seminoles in Florida. It was a smaller conflict than the previous one, primarily involving skirmishes in the Everglades. The U.S. government's objective was to remove the remaining Seminoles by force if necessary. The war concluded with a handful of Seminoles, including their leader Billy Bowlegs, agreeing to relocate to Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma. However, a small number of Seminoles remained in the swamps of Florida, never formally surrendering. Across the Great Plains, the Sioux Wars, including the infamous Battle of Little Bighorn, highlighted the fierce resistance of Plains tribes. Spanning 36 years from 1854 to 1890, these conflicts were a brutal struggle for control of the land between the native Sioux tribes and the United States government. Driven by the discovery of gold in the sacred Black Hills, the government sought to claim these lands. Yet the Sioux, along with their Cheyenne and Arapaho allies, refused to be displaced. The Battle of Little Bighorn, also known as Custer's Last Stand, remains a symbol of this resistance, where the combined forces of the tribes famously defeated the 7th Cavalry. However, the victory was short-lived. The tribes faced relentless military campaigns, culminating in the tragic Wounded Knee Massacre. These wars, these struggles, these acts of defiance are not just historical events. They are the echoes of a remarkable fortitude that reverberates through the centuries. From the Pueblo people's audacious revolt to the formidable uprising led by Ottawa leader Pontiac, each conflict paints a vivid picture of the resilience and bravery of Native American tribes. If this journey through history has moved you, please like, share, and comment below. What stories of resistance inspire you? Join the conversation and help us keep these memories alive.